Good morning, everyone. It's good to be speaking in front of such a brilliant crowd over here. What I'm going to do is just quickly switch on this presentation. So I'm presenting the demonstration component of the OASYS South Asia project that we've been speaking about over here. Just very briefly before I do that, I'll just speak about TERI. We are one of the partners in this multi-consortium project. TERI, of course, has been doing work on energy and environment issues for over 40 years in South Asia and Africa, largely. We do both research and implementation activities. Currently, we are also the capacity building hub for the SE for All that people have been speaking about here. As well as we have our own program for lighting, the Lighting a Billion Lights program, which primarily works on solar lighting and mini grids. It's interesting because we've been seeing the mini grid development happen in India since the mid-90s. Although this has become something that a lot of agencies have now taken on over the last 10 years in terms of international agencies. We have seen solar mini grids being set up by state renewable development agencies through the mid-90s onwards. So there's a lot of experience in India that we can also share perhaps outside of this presentation. I'm joined here by two of my senior colleagues, Debajit and Parimita. I'll be presenting the work, but you can direct questions at all three of us, and we'll be here through the day to answer anything or discuss more about this project. There's a slight change in the presentation from what you have in your dossier. I just added one presentation and made this picture a little bigger, so it's not plastic, so that you can see them better. Coming to the OASYS project itself, I'll just briefly introduce it. Our key research questions here. One is, are there cost-effective, secure, and reliable local pocket electricity supply solutions that can meet the present and future needs and are socially acceptable, institutionally viable, and environmentally desirable? It's a long question, but it kind of brings together the work that we've been doing for the last 5 years in terms of both academic research and field-based activities. And once we have done that, we're also looking at whether there is a potential to scale up any of these initiatives, because that is something that perhaps has been lacking in a lot of the projects that have happened so far. So that's in brief about the OASYS project itself. How have we done this? We are looking at various angles of research, the techno-economics of the project, governance issues, socio-political dimension, and also environmental aspects. And in terms of the flowchart, what we started out with 5 years back was an exercise of reviewing what has already been done in South Asia, taking that, turning that into demonstration projects. We have 4 demonstration projects I'll speak about. Using those demonstration projects as avenues for capacity building, and then using that also to produce policy briefs and policy advisory to the government. So I'm going to be focusing on work package 3, which is the demonstration project component of this. Before I go into this, and I think coming back to the point that mini grids have been implemented for a very long period of time by a variety of different agencies, I think it was important for us to see what we could do a little bit new in this, especially in the Indian context, in the South Asian context. So, of course, these are a bunch of questions. There are more complex questions, but these are some of the questions that we wanted to ask. We had some money, and we had ways in which we could have spent it. Now, there is the way that you can, there's a program, for example, with the government of India right now, which gives a 90% capital subsidy. We don't know if that's the best way to do it. There might be other programs which provide different kinds of subsidies, but we were interested in seeing how best you can use this money in perhaps smarter ways to do different kinds of models. So that's some of the things that we were thinking about. We had a focus here on off-grid sites, and now it's interesting because once you get into these off-grid sites, there are many other parameters that actually also become important in terms of access, in terms of paying capacities, in terms of the availability of resources, in terms of other constraints like regulation. And all of this impact the final design of the system that you put on the ground, and also the ways in which you design your business model. It's not always easy to collect revenue as this is what experience has taught us. So even that design, the technical and financial design, has to be based on what the site is about, and that's something that I like to speak of. And then you can take that and you can scale it up. One of the things that we really wanted to do was, now with the solar industry, especially in the last 10 years at least, with cost falling and there being a market for solar created by national level policies in India, there have been a large number of private players who come into the business. Of course, large-scale, megawatt-scale power plants are much more attractive in terms of returns and in terms of assurance for revenues, because you get feed-in tariff after you fit into the grid. But we also want to see how these same private players can get involved in these smaller projects as well. Now, what is lacking? Is a 90% subsidy the only way to go? There might be better ways to do it. So that's what we wanted to explore here, as to how with perhaps lesser quantums of money, we can impact a larger number of people. It's one of the questions that was being asked in the previous presentation as well. The other important actor beyond the private operator is the local government, who has, so the local government or local administration, not just the government but also say the local distribution company, who are important players in the future, in basically in a place where these mini grids are going to have to be integrated and connected to the main grid. You get these people on board, and unless you get these people on board, that's going to be very difficult to do. You can have isolated mini grids, but you need to get the buy-in of the local government. Now, it could be in simple ways in terms of getting you land grants, or it could be just facilitating the process of revenue collection. But we wanted to also see how we can actually get the local government to play a bigger role, and we'll just talk about that one of the demonstration project components. Thirdly, we also wanted to build in some potential for scaling up. So we don't think about these projects as one-time demonstration projects that we will do and we will leave. It's very easy to do that. A lot of people have done it. And great exit strategy, everyone's empowered and you go. But I think what we also wanted to do is to identify at the outset projects that we could scale up, say in the next phase, or work with the government or another agency and scale up in the future. There has been a lot of technological advancements. Remote monitoring could be one of them. But what these do essentially is, more importantly, is that even if they do increase their system cost by a little bit, especially in these kinds of areas, they help you sustain the system for a longer period of time. I'll get into a few of those and what we did in terms of battery management, in terms of remote monitoring, and how that we believe will help in ensuring that the system runs for a longer period of time. If there's more information, if there's better efficiencies, that is something that we've seen as possible. So, just to confuse everyone, I've used mini, micro, pico, all the three terms. These terms, of course, were debated in the previous session. These are terms that we have defined based on, because there are a large number of definitions available as to what the benchmark is in terms of kilowatts. Let's not take them too seriously, let's just call them microgrids or mini grids, whatever you're comfortable with. But the basic idea here is that we looked at three different management and technical models, essentially because one size does not fit all. These are the three models that we are working with. One is a community managed model, and we are partnering here with a non-government organization, local NGO on the field, where we have put in AC and DC microgrids of different capacities in a cluster of 5 villages. Now these 5 villages are in the Dhenkanal district of Odisha. Odisha is a state in India with a pretty high percentage of non-electrified households. And I can get into different details of why Odisha perhaps after this presentation, but even that process of selecting Odisha as a state on this particular site was quite a long process, took about 6 months, a lot of negotiations, a lot of discussions with the DISCOM and with other players whose support we needed to go forward with this. This project has been commissioned a few months back and is serving about 150 households. That's the first model. The second model was again a community managed model, but here we had the district administration as a partner. This project is in the process of implementation. Once I go back, we'll be issuing the purchase orders for the solar equipment. It's a larger project, about 18 to 20 kilowatts. And this is another district of Odisha with a very active district administration who has come forward to support us. We see this as an exciting project going forward in terms of the partnership that it could form. The third one is a privately operated micro-utility model. One of our partners here is Mera Gambhar. and the other partner is Minda Foundation. I'll just talk about both the partners briefly after this. The idea of this privately developed private model was to see what incentives we could give to private operators of mini-grid systems, so that we don't perhaps subsidize them completely, but we give them some sort of a viability gap fund. So we invited bids from operators. I'll get into details of that in a bit. What we have here is solar DC microgrids in Uttar Pradesh, which is another state in India, serving about 4,200 households, and picogrids, which is basically 10 households connected to one grid, serving about 500 households and markets. This again is something that we hope to complete by August 2015. Now for the details. So the first model is it's a community managed model, and the point I want to make here is that when you're talking about different technical and institutional configurations for different sites, that becomes particularly relevant in the case of this site. Now here we have 5 villages which are inside a reserve forest area. There are Supreme Court regulations that do not allow electricity lines to be drawn through that forest, essentially because it's an elephant corridor. So these villages are going to be occupied for a very long period of time. But what also happens in these kinds of sites is that, now one is that the village community is quite isolated. It's about 12 kilometers by dirt road, on a very difficult road. We had a lot of trouble implementing this because of rains, because of just high costs of implementation. And it's a 100% tribal population, quite cut off from, say, the nearby towns and villages in terms of just cooperation. So what you get is a particularly economically and socially isolated community. Now when you have that kind of a community, we first try to get some private operator to come and work here. Looking at the number of people, looking at the possibility of migration, the kinds of loads that could be there, the uncertainty of demand in summers, winters changing, private operators were not really willing to come to such an area because they were quite sure that they're not going to get their returns. So what you do for such areas is try and create capacities within that area to be able to manage their own kind of own grid. That's what we did, which is why we created a VEC, which is a Village Energy Committee. And it was not so hard to do because there were 5 villages and all of them had the same kind, the population was the same tribe. So there was general cooperation between all of them. So we could have a democratically elected Village Energy Committee with 2 members from each village. It takes time. You have to do everything in a very transparent manner, but in these kinds of operations it works. Now what happens to that process is that this VC actually becomes empowered and is not too dependent on, say the block office or the district administration for the development of this system. So that was important in this case. 5 sites. 2 of them really small. So in 3 of them, which was of slightly larger size and better connected, we put up AC systems. And this process of design and selection of which system to go for itself was a very long process. We saw that in such kinds of sites where there is very limited economic activity, it would help to start a few economic activities. So we have identified those as well. So you have 3 villages that are AC villages, the Rajanga, Kanka and Dalkali villages, where there are 40 households, but we've also created some capacity, additional capacity to run livelihood applications such as, complete business units, grinding, packaging. They have turmeric, which grows quite predominantly over here. They do some sort of leaf plate making. So we try to support these activities, which would eventually we hope bring in income, but it's going to be a long-term impact. We're hoping we installed this early this year. So maybe in the next 2 years, some of these activities will fully develop and we should be able to see income coming in, which will go back into the power plant. And in the other 2 sites where the populations were quite small, in order to be able to manage costs, and we went for DC systems. But what we've ensured is that regardless of whether you're an AC or a DC system, the quality of light, even the look of the light that you have at your house is exactly the same. So that there is no conflict in terms of somebody getting something different from me, especially when they're living so close together and you want them to cooperate. So that is important. So a lot of our decisions were on trying to ensure that everyone feels like they're on board with this project, getting the same benefits out of it, Each village has its own operator, village entry committee monitors that system, they do the revenue collection, they pay the operator, and they put the rest of the money in a battery replacement fund. Beyond the technical design, beyond the institutional design, we also have one inverter which we made grid interactive. Now the first village, which is Rajangarh, which has got the largest power plant of 6 kilowatt peak, is also the best connected, which is why it's got the largest power plant, because that's where we put in the livelihood appliances. Just so that when a truck comes in to collect, say, turmeric, there is easy access. But everyone in all the villages can work there, essentially because the VEC has been formed in that way. So in that village, we also have a grid interactive inverter. In case the grid does come at some point of time, we're not sure if it will, but if it does come, then there is an opportunity to feed into the grid. If some of, say, the livelihood appliances stop working at some point of time. We put in battery management systems, which are very important in such areas. Whatever the installer of the system might tell you, he's not going to go back there as often as he promised you on contract to look into the system and to repair it. So you have to make sure at the outset that you put in as many safety measures to ensure a longer life for the system. That is something that we put in. The DC microgrids are auto cut off and they're timer based. I'll show you a picture of the DC microgrid. We've housed it in a box so that there is no tampering at all. And yeah, the last point about households connected to AC or DC having exactly the same looking lamps. We still have some problems which I'll come to at some point of time. So this is what it looks like. The pink building is something that the community actually contributed to constructing. So that was good to see. That's what happens in such kinds of communities. You see that kind of cooperation happening. That's a 6 kilowatt power plant with the battery inverter room on the side. The man standing in the middle below is next to the DC microgrid. You can see that the battery, the inverter, the battery, the charge controller, and the timer device are all inside the box. It's tamper-proof, and the key is with the partner NGO. It's only opened in case it's necessary to fix it. Even then, people have figured out ways, of course, inside their houses to tamper with it, which we've taken care of. This is, and I'm going to show you a film also about this just after this presentation, a very short draft film that we have. So that's number one, where you're looking at a model which is community run and which is largely subsidized, where you're trying to create enough income generating potential to replace batteries and take care of minor maintenance issues. Now, although that model may not be looked at as the best model in some cases, in certain kinds of scenarios, especially in these very remote, low-paying capacity rural areas, perhaps that is one of the options, especially if you're the government, where you need to start creating a load such that somebody can come in maybe 2 years later and actually connect, say, a privately operated grid. But for now, this seemed like something that we needed to do there. In the second case, we work with private operators. We sent out an EOI, expression of interest, to about 20 operators, asking them to get back to us with what they wanted to do and how much that would cost. And also give us a percentage of how much viability gap funding they wanted from us to be able to do that successfully. There were a few riders in that. One of them was that you need to be able to build in a business model that scales up with the amount of money that we give you. It's not like we give you X amount and you use that just for the project today. If you're building a business case, then use that amount also to be able to invest further, ring-fence that amount of money and scale up your activities. The two people that we are working with here is, one is Mera Rampar. I think people are familiar with Mera Rampar. Indian company that basically supplies DC microgrids in a utility-based mode. They set up the DC microgrid for 25 to 30 households, have a weekly charge, and essentially supply 2 light points and a mobile charging point, which is modular in some sense. The other person we are working with is Linda Foundation, which is, say not private, but they're working with in a mode where, so we're not restricted to completely to private companies, but to people who are operating it privately, rather. Linda Foundation is interesting, and I'll just come to in details of what they did with the money and how they leveraged funding from other sources as well. So very quickly, this is the solar DC microgrid that is installed by Mera Rampar. So 2 light points and a mobile charging point for 7 hours. Identifies 30 households, sees if there's an interest in connecting to the grid, connects them. Follows a model that is widely used in microfinance for collection of revenue. So their biggest challenge as a private operator was how do I collect revenue in a manner that does not affect my business. Because that really is the challenge in rural areas in India where people are perhaps used to subsidized power or can collectively decide not to pay, and there's not much you can do about it. So they used a joint liability group model, been working quite well for the last 2-3 years, wherein these customers of one microgrid, say 25 to 30 customers, are liable to each other. So in case I'm not able to pay, somebody will pay for me, maybe once or twice, but of course my connection is cut the third time. I can't keep doing that. But the fact is that you try and see that people are responsible for each other and ensure that the amount of money that needs to come in that definitely comes in every month. So how are we doing this? What we are doing here is supporting them or working with them to establish 2,900 households, so connections for 2,900 households. And that comes to about 55% of the project cost. We are supporting them about 55% of the project cost, under the condition that in the next 2 years, the revenue that's being earned from these 2,900 households will be invested to scale up the initiative to another 1,500 households. And that is something that we're going to monitor. And this is exciting because it's now we know how much support somebody like Mera requires to be able to not just put a system down and leave and earn a profit and get your payback, but also be able to expand that initiative with the returns from that business. Yeah, in a similar way, we're working with Linda. They also use the joint liability group model, as it's mentioned in the second point. They work with both houses and shops. Now, what is interesting here is that, of course, we are providing them a little bit of support. It's not much at all, as you can see. Linda has got some equity that they're investing in this. But more importantly, what they're doing is they're enabling these joint liability groups so that they've got a cluster of 10 households each. You can get those 10 households together. It's a small enough number to work with. And that's why it's around 10, because what these 10 people do is they collectively decide that they're going to buy a microgrid system for themselves. Minda guarantees them because it's an organization that has credibility in that area, and they approach a bank and get a loan for that system. So in a sense, it is private on various levels, so that people are taking their own decisions to be able to buy these systems for themselves. So you have 3 sources of funding. This would not have been possible if they didn't have this little bit of a gap funding from Terry's end or from the OASYS project end to be able to meet the balance of costs. This is an exciting model because as the cost of solar falls, it's quite likely that these 10 households in the next 2 years will be able to buy the system completely by themselves. So what they do need is a supporting hand in terms of a guarantor. And that's the role that Minda plays here beyond capacity building. Some pictures of the Minda sites. So these are, you can see in the first picture what 225 watt peak looks like. It's about, opposed to Miragaon past 2 panels, this is about 4. This is the inverter and the battery here. And of course this is all AC power. The third model is not implemented yet, so it was a typo. It's in this village in Odisha where what we are doing again is, of course, a solar power plant, but the idea here and the most important say, development in this project has been the formation of this project management committee, which has a limited role for the OASYS project of the all Terry as a partner. We are going to be there with the project, we're going to install it, we're going to build capacities, and at some point of time we have to exit the project. But at that point of time, the question is, who do you give that project over to? And in this case, we've been lucky, and a lot of work has actually paid off because the district administration, each district is headed by a district collector, and I'm one of them. And they have come forward to say that we will actually take over the management of the project. This is good for various reasons. One is because, unlike an NGO, unlike a private player, the district administration is definitely going to be there for a very long period of time. It's their job, they're stable. The other thing is that they have access to funding, and they have access to funding for development of the area at large. So they have funding, they support labor programs, they support forestry, they support livelihoods programs. If they can do that, then they can also set aside some part of their money for the long-term maintenance and operation of this mini grid. It's also much easier for them to coordinate with the distribution company and then connect to the grid in the future. So this is something that is in the process of implementation at this point of time. Once it's done and we've handed it over, what we will have is, although the project management committee will monitor it and look at the revenues and monitor that, there will be one operator or a franchisee who will be the front face of the entire power plant. His job would be to go and get connections or get people to connect, but also to collect revenue, and a small percentage of the power sold minus the tariff collected will be given to him as a payment for that. So it's also the franchisee actually is incentivized to connect more households. The more he connects, the more power he sells, and the more his income from that project is. Just to sum up, what we're doing is that focusing on completing the 2 projects that are ongoing, and then looking at these kinds of variations of business models based on the location, based on the paying capacities, based on who the strong actors are in that particular location. We're hoping to be able to come out with policy recommendations on the way forward for different categories of customers in rural areas. Thank you. Yeah, very quickly. Just very quickly show you a draft video of the first site, which is a community managed power plant.
People in our village face a lot of difficulties due to lack of electricity. After sunset, nobody could do any activity and stayed in darkness. Since our village is located in a forest area, various wild animals such as elephants would come into the village. Due to lack of light, we even faced difficulty while studying. We never received any facility under government schemes and felt helpless.
Rajanga and its neighbouring villages had never seen electricity. Nor did they stand a chance in future due to their remote location in the middle of dense forests. How can such backward regions be electrified? Can there be a solution that is customized for their needs? A solution which is technically viable, affordable, socially acceptable and manageable by local communities.
In this project, we have...
These questions brought together a group of researchers from India and the UK to Dhain Canal in the state of Odisha to demonstrate a reliable and local off-grid electricity supply solution. Terry started work here in 2012 with a cluster of 5 villages: Rajanga village, Rajanga hamlet, Baguli, Chadoi and Kanaka villages, all separated by a few kilometers. The idea was to electrify the entire cluster through 5 separate solar mini-grids, which are collectively managed by a single entity led by the villagers themselves. So the first step was to form a village energy committee with representatives from all 5 villages. Irada, a local NGO, was brought in to handhold the VEC through various processes and to monitor the project. Suresh Pradhan, a local villager, was unanimously chosen by the villagers to lead the VEC. His grandfather Basudev donated land to build a community center to house the mini grid. Quite evidently, the villagers were excited.
Government had agreed to electrify our village, but the project was stopped. Now, we are receiving solar light and are completely dependent on it. My family has been staying here for generations. Those who migrated to this village had no space to stay and had asked me for land which I gave. So when this solar project started, a suitable land was required to build the community center, which again I happily donated.
Based on the load profiles of the villages, the project team designed 5 independent systems. The bigger villages, Rajanga, Kanaka and Baguli, got AC mini grids that could cater to an average of 40 households per system. In addition, they could also handle other productive, community and agricultural loads. The 2 smaller sites, Rajanga Hamlet and Chadoi, were given DC microgrids that could provide lighting and mobile charging to an average of 15 households per system. Both AC and DC systems provide each household with 2 light points and a mobile charging point.
We were living on the roots and fruits from the forest and didn't know what light was. Now, my children are able to study at school during the daytime and at home during the night. They even take tuitions in the evening. I'm really grateful for the light.
The grids have also lit up street lights, making it safer for women and children to move around after dark and also to keep the elephants away at night. Beyond lighting, the next objective was to use the solar grids to create income opportunities in such poverty-ridden regions. The villagers narrowed upon a few livelihood activities related to locally available raw material. A turmeric grinder with an electronic weighing scale and a sealing machine were made available to all users at the community center. As part of self-help groups, women were trained to use these appliances. Gradually, this has helped the SHGs to standardize their product and sell it directly in the market without being exploited by middlemen. Similarly, the traditional activity of stitching sal leaf plates has been given a facelift.
Women collect sal leaves from the forest in the evening, and with the light provided at home, they stitch the leaves. I collect them in the morning and take them to the community center, where we press the leaves using an electronic plate maker. I return the leaf plates to the women in the evening. They then sell it in the market and earn from it.
As President of the Village Energy Committee, Suresh Pradhan remains vigilant about any complaints or technical issues. To ensure smooth operation and maintenance of the grids, each village is serviced by an operator. The villagers are happy to pay a nominal monthly fee for light and other services.
As an operator, I collect a monthly fee of ₹50 from each household. I usually maintain a record, after which I submit the collected amount to the Village Energy Committee. The amount collected helps us with the maintenance of the system and its further development.
These are early days yet to evaluate the sustainability of this pilot. Electricity has come to these villages after a very long wait, and they are not willing to let go of it easily.
We will be able to sustain the project only if everybody in the village works together towards its success. It is not possible for an individual to manage it alone. Everyone needs to sit and discuss it and then take decisions with mutual consensus. Only then can we make it happen. But yes, we can sustain it.